Hi, my name is Mark Levitt, and I'm going to continue reading the Triunistic Model of Reality, Chapter 1, titled Is. And we'll start with the journal entry that I wrote on April 2nd of 2012. Then I wrote, between 2001 and 2002, I experienced 3 separate spontaneous events, each being a dramatic and profound physical shift in perspective that puts our everyday perception into a greater context. The first experience revealed that there is nothing behind us. And I mean that literally with no reservations whatsoever. You have never moved an inch your whole life, and not for one moment has there, nor could there, ever be anything behind you. That is not something that I ever talk about or think about, simply because the profundity of the following 2 experiences seemed at the time to render the first experience a mere stepping stone or a preparation for the second and third experience. The second experience revealed that this is it. The very world that you're experiencing right now is actually the same aware space that you are seeking when you pine for God, heaven, nirvana, etc. The aware space that we are all living from is both the supreme source of all of manifestation, as well as the capacity for that manifestation. There is nothing but this aware space and its ever-evolving manifestation. The third experience revealed that this is the act of folding, bending, contracting, etc. That is the secret to the specifics of how the one manifests as the many, how mind manifests as matter, how heaven and earth are related, even how man and God are related. The fold was revealed to be the ultimate and most elusive mystery to all of man's age-old questions about who we are, how did we get here, and where are we going. One elegant process naturally and effortlessly reveals the true nature of identity, creation, and destiny. This would be the final vision that I would ever experience. After this experience, I would spend the next 10 years going back and forth, trying to find the right way to communicate what I experienced, and feeling too overwhelmed by the idea of finding the right way to put it in words. Because the very basis of what I experienced was that this is it, or in other words, the physical world that we experience is actually an appearance of truth itself. I was confident that this truth should also be found in our sciences and religions. After all, these disciplines are ultimately based on observing reality, whether it is our external reality or our inward reality. So over the last 10 years, I would often search the internet for the scientists and world religions' answers to man's most profound question of who we are and how did we get here. So after looking to science and religion for any clues that may explain my 3 experiences, it began to dawn on me that they did both offer a context for my experiences, but each for different reasons. What I found was that advanced religious academics seem to understand that the one manifests as the many, but I've never found one attempt to explain just how this magical feat could ever be pulled off. Everybody just seems to be satisfied that it is simply a mystery, and therefore the subject is allowed to be casually shrugged off as a mere distraction. Meanwhile, science seems to be greatly aware of the mysterious process that enables the one to manifest as the many, and that is the fold. But unfortunately, although science is well aware of the folding principle in nature, such as the curvature of space, the contracting force of gravity, the vortex of a black hole, a folding universe to account for wormholes, bending of light to create rainbows, refraction, so on and so forth. They are unaware of the profound implications of the fold and why it is at the very center of all creation. So what I see is that religion holds a little piece of the puzzle and science is holding the other piece, but they are both suspicious and ignore each other because they aren't familiar with the part of the secret that the other has. I see both of them flirting with the same truth, which is the triunistic aspect of reality, but each of them are arriving at that truth from opposite directions. For example, taking the triunistic perspective into consideration, I could easily empathize with the position of the scientist, the religious person, and the everyday person. Since I know awareness, or aware space, to be the supreme source of all reality, I could say to the religious person that I also see that God is everything. There is nothing that God is not, since God is eternal, infinite, and omnipresent. Since I know that it is the function of aware space to become aware of itself through the magnetic attraction to itself, I could say to the scientist that I also see that all of manifest reality is a predictable, mechanistic functioning of the natural laws of physics. There is only a variance in conditions and the reliable results of those conditions. Since I know that as an individual, I am the inseparability of awareness, which is the religious aspect, and its functioning, which correlates to the scientific aspect, I could say to the everyday person that I also see that we, as individuals, are the intersection of mind and body. That is why man is always, no matter what he admits to himself, both scientific and religious in nature. Our religious impulses correspond with the black bottom of the black bottom half of the circle, which is the mystery, the unmanifest, the void, etc. Our scientific impulses correspond with the white top half of the circle, which is known as the world, the manifest, the finite, etc. There are always extremes, but even the extreme religious man would have to admit an interest in perhaps an awe as far as the functioning of the physical universe, even if he wants to refer to that functioning as intelligent design. And likewise, even the most scientific man would have to admit an interest in perhaps an awe at the sense of self that he experiences, even if he regards that sense of self to be an impersonal neurological reaction. But I think most of us find ourselves right here in the middle, completely mystified and ultimately unsatisfied with the answers that both camps are providing us separately. As far as sharing the triunistic model of reality, where it is the fold that makes the one manifest as the many, I suspect that it will perhaps be easier to convey this understanding to the astute philosopher, specifically the non-dualist. The reason being is that the non-dualist studies awareness and naturally is familiar with the qualities of awareness, namely its eternal quality. Once it is recognized that awareness is eternal and therefore not subject to causation, the rest of the entire history of the universe naturally and necessarily follows from this original truth. What is interesting and perhaps telling about the scientist's inquiry into truth is that what ultimately confounds scientists the most is none other than, yes, that's right, awareness. Studying the essence of man, neurologists have been able to map out virtually every aspect of the human dynamic, but the one area that they are no closer to understanding now than ever is awareness. Awareness, or consciousness, as the preferred word of the scientist, is known as the hard problem. In other words, there is no accounting for consciousness with our current understanding of the brain, which incidentally, the current understanding is profoundly vast and thorough, making it much more impressive that it still eludes scientists. Also, when we study the nature of the physical world that man seems to inhabit, the physicists have also been able to map out virtually every aspect of the universe, but the one area that confounds their studies is, yes, that's right, awareness. The most advanced physicists in the world have delved so thoroughly into the nature of matter that they have found themselves deep in the rabbit hole of recognizing the observer effect on the very matter that they are studying. It seems all too obvious that it is awareness that confounds the scientist at all turns, just that it is the process or functioning of awareness that confounds the religious man. So my point is not to say that I have solved the riddle of existence, but rather that the scientist and the religious man have already solved it. If only we could get these guys to come together. We can see the modern scientist's contribution to solving the riddle in theoretical physics, and their only shortcoming seems to be mistaking awareness to be a mere effect rather than the causeless cause. Likewise, we can see ancient religion's contribution to solving the riddle in the concept of the triune, and their only shortcoming is to be satisfied with the explanation that it is a mystery, rather than trying to explain the infinitely complex implication of the imagination process. Then again, you can't blame the religious man because it is not necessarily his domain to understand, let alone explain this process. And likewise, you can't blame the physical scientist for not understanding the nature of awareness because their domain of research is by definition limited to the physical domain. But it is the everyday man that finds himself once again square in the center of awareness and its mechanistic process. Although I have the utmost respect for scientists, I can't claim to be one, and I don't wish to paint myself as anything other than a casual fan of some very specific scientific aspects. Also, I have the utmost respect for religion, but I do not wish to paint myself as anything other than a casual fan of some very specific religious aspects. I am only beholden to truth, and I see it on both sides of the circle. If I wanted to describe the science-religious relationship, I could simply draw the circle with the bottom blacked out and the label that as religion, being the bottom half, represents the void and the unmanifest behind us. So basically, I would assign that as religion and then label the top half as science, as that represents the world in front of us. That's the world that we study. That's the world that science studies. This is the world that religious studies. And here we are right in the middle. Man would be the crease in between science and religion. And when he studies outwardly, he is studying the world or science. And when he studies inwardly, he is studying the mystery or the religion. Think of the circle as a bird's eye view of the human perspective. Directly in front of you is the top half of the circle, and behind you is the bottom half of the circle. It's your bird's eye view. Now we move to August 25th, 2012. It is still an evolving work, but I will give you the broad strokes. The first thing that I want to point out is that wisdom is constantly evolving, and the next natural step is to go beyond the recent trend of non-duality. For anyone already established in the non-dual experience, it is already evident through self-verification through self-verification that the mind, awareness, self, is all there is. So I will begin by pointing out that we would be much more accurate to refer to this as aware space rather than awareness, because it's a deeper nuance that when looked at in the same vein as the classic yin-yang, it also serves as the root template for every other aspect of reality. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Let me take this. The space or the capacity refers to the inactive side of awareness. This is referred to as being the yin of the yin-yang, or you could look at it as being the feminine aspect, the passive, or the undifferentiated aspect of reality. While the aware aspect of awareness refers to the active side of awareness, which has been referred to as the yang, the masculine, or the differentiated aspect of reality. So, while the female aspect of reality is inactive space, the male aspect is actively aware. And like I pointed out in my first book, it necessarily follows that awareness would have no choice but to be aware of itself, since there's nothing else to be aware of, which would necessarily cause a contraction or a fold of some sort just from the sheer power of this magnetic attraction to itself. You could think of it like a black hole collapsing under its own energy, but I literally experienced it as a fold or a loop, so that's the analogy that I usually go with more often. So, if the first aspect of reality is what it is, which we have established to be aware space, the second aspect of reality would be what it does, which is necessarily established as being actively aware or attracted to the only thing that is, which is itself. And the third aspect of reality would necessarily be the result of this contracting or folding of aware space, which is duality, or the appearance of there being a you and another. It is that original contraction of awareness that created duality, and as a consequence, that original contraction naturally and unavoidably continues to mirror itself on every level within the very dualistic world that it created. Kind of like a mother and father, or a child takes on the traits of the mother and father that created it. So that sentence is so vital to understanding the triune, the true nature of our entire existence. So it's worth repeating. So I'll repeat. It is that original contraction of awareness that created duality, and as a consequence, that original contraction naturally and unavoidably continues to mirror itself on every level within the very dualistic world that it created. We can see it literally everywhere we look when we look close enough. It is seen in every aspect of nature, from the contraction and expansion of each heartbeat to the cycle of day and night. We experience the cycles that vary from winter and summer seasons of the year to incarnate and discarnate phases of life. But it is not only the cyclic nature of existence that mirrors itself in the dualistic world. One of the many aspects of the original contraction that you also see mirrored in the emergent dualistic world is the very dynamic that is responsible for the cyclic nature of reality. And that is the magnetic attraction that caused the original contraction in the first place. And the magnetic attraction that made creation inevitable also mirrors itself on every creation's very reproductive system itself. Whether you're talking about the binding of cells, the colonization of organisms, plants reaching for the light, fertilizer finding the egg, or just a guy checking out a girl's body. I can go on and on about this for hours, and I do intend to get all this out on paper, but I want to end this thought with a few of the implications that necessarily follow from this perspective. The first and foremost being that this is actually it. If you're looking for heaven, then look no further. Just like the appearance of a rainbow does not take away from the fact that the rainbow is actually clear white light. The appearance of things does not take away from the fact that right now we are staring straight into the abyss. And at this very moment, you are mistaking the abyss to be these words that you are reading right now or listening to right now. Or maybe not. Perhaps you are aware that the very scene you are taking in right now is indeed actually the very abyss from which all manifestations arise. Another important implication is that the moment of creation is actually and always right now. And furthermore, manifestation will never end. Any apparent end only gives way to a new beginning, which only gives way to another end, ever evolving. Also, every part of our evolutionary past is still with us. But the last insight I will share with you on this topic is the reason that I'm writing in the first place. If I had to simplify my point about the triunistic perspective, then I would say that the mathematical formula of life, the universe, and everything is 1 divided by 1 equals 3. The 1 folding in on itself results in emergent manifestation. That's the third thing. The third emerges from the inseparability of the 1 and itself as an apparent other, due to the folding or the self-division. And I know that this does not seem to make sense yet, so that is why I will put it in a way that you could actually visualize the same point. So let's examine the trianistic dynamic by imagining a single wooden stick bending over to rub against itself until fire spontaneously emerges from the potential within. The first aspect of the triune in this particular metaphor is the stick itself, which represents the potential. The second aspect is the rubbing of the stick, which represents the activity or process that transforms the base into the fruit. In this particular example, the base is represented by the stick and the fruit is represented by the resultant fire. So the third aspect is represented by the emergence of the fire that was created from its own process, the path, which in this case, the process was the bending over to rub against itself. Kind of like if you rub a male against a female, a third person emerges out of pure potentiality. But I would like to elaborate more on the stick rubbing itself to transform itself into fire. This is a good place to start with specific examples of a triunistic model of understanding, because we start with just one simple item, a singular twig. So in this example, the twig itself and consequential folding over and rubbing itself would be the twig's path, or its doing. It's what the stick does. And the emergent fire would be what the twig transforms into or manifests as. So all along, the twig was actually ripe with the potential of being fire, but it was only the folding or the path of the twig that transformed the potential into an actualized emergence. This is the very dynamic that mirrors the very original dynamic that is responsible for all of reality that has ever or could ever be. The original dynamic that I just outlined above is simply a metaphor for aware space contracting in on itself due to the magnetic attraction to itself, resulting in poof, awareness of awareness, the original duality. All right, so now we're going to continue with September 29th of 2012. The following something I wrote in response to somebody asking me if I thought that I had reached the highest level of enlightenment, to which the answer is a hard and emphatic no. But the question did provide me a perfect opportunity to clarify that what I meant by "this is it" in book 1. So now this is the journal that I wrote. Oh boy, I hope that every time I say that this is it, that I'm not giving the impression that I'm saying my current state of mind or perspective is the ultimate. I know that I am not the only one that has used the expression "this is it," and I don't necessarily know what others mean, so let me share with you what I intend to communicate when I use those words, "this is it." All right, so whenever I say to someone that this is it, what I mean to convey is not a particular state of mind, but rather a sense of location. In other words, the very place that you are looking for, whether it be heaven, nirvana, the astral realms, the bardos, the great Om, emptiness, the void, enlightenment world, space, or even capacity itself, is actually nowhere other than this very same aware space that you are staring into as you read or hear these words right now. I get the feeling that people think that they are living in a pumpkin and that one day they will leave the pumpkin and graduate and move off to a new place, maybe an apple. And my point is that there is no place to go. There is only this aware space, where distance is only a figment of our infinite imagination. Everything that can ever exist exists, however, potentially. in this very aware space that it currently manifesting as a computer screen with these words on it, or my voice on it, in it, whatever. The phenomenal aspect of reality is endlessly evolving. I look at the experience of enlightenment as simply a passing from 59 seconds to the next and new minute, or 59 minutes to the next and new hour, etc. Of course, there will always be the next day, the next month, the next year, decade, century, millennium, kalpa, ad infinitum. And that is why I love the expression, if you think that the prospect of death is disturbing, just wait until you find out that you cannot die. All right, so going back to the Trianistic perspective, I want to make clear what I mean by this is it. We have the three aspects of reality. The first aspect is the base, or the source, which is undifferentiated aware space. The second aspect is the path, or the function, which is active awareness, or its movement. That's the folding, contracting. The third aspect is the fruit, or result of awareness being attracted to itself, and that result is the original sense of duality or consciousness of something, rather than undifferentiated awareness. My point is that this third aspect of reality, the manifest world that we're all seeing right now, is all we know. Everyone wants to get to know or experience the first aspect of reality, the unmanifest, the void, but what they don't realize is that the only factor that ensures that the first aspect does indeed appear as the third aspect, the void appearing as the world that we're looking right now, it is the second aspect of reality, which is the folding. The second aspect of reality is the inevitable contraction or folding of awareness caused by the inherent power of attraction to itself. So when I say that this is it, I am just saying that the manifest world is actually a misperception of the unmanifest itself. In an attempt to explain this to a Christian friend, I once grabbed a piece of paper and said that this piece of paper is God. Not being familiar with Christianity myself, I described how I saw the mystery of the Trinity to fit quite neatly with the Trianistic perspective. So the paper itself correlates with the Father aspect of the Christian Trinity. This is the base, or what it is. Then I folded the paper in half, creating a crease, and I said that this crease is the sun. This is the path, or this is what the paper does. So we start with what it is, which is the paper, and what the paper does is creates a crease or a fold from the power of attraction. And I said that this crease is the sun. This is the path, or what the paper actually does. Finally, I held up the resultant folded up piece of paper, which gives the appearance of two, and said that this is the Holy Ghost, the fruit, or its creation. So the Holy Ghost for me fits the bill perfectly for the dualistic world of appearances. Or to put it more simply, you could think of the Holy Ghost as an illusion in the sense of Maya, samsara, etc., which is caused by the fold, or the sun in this analogy. When it comes to the sun, Just think man, or more broadly, individuality. Since the sun, or individuality, is only the crease in the paper and not the paper itself, the individual could spend his whole life looking for an actual self, but there is nothing actually there beyond the simple crease or indentation. That's why I called the spiritual path a suicide mission. Done correctly, you are setting to flatten out the crease, which is you. Incidentally, I think the piece of paper analogy is also a perfect way to demonstrate how the one manifests as the infinite experiences of individuality. If we look at the base, or the actual paper itself, as the supreme source, or the singular, then to illustrate the path or the paper itself, we would crumble the paper into a ball, creating a complex and seemingly infinite arrangement of wrinkles, and would represent infinite variations of the folding process, thereby producing infinite variations or fruit. So you would be one possible configuration as a result of the specific way your particular paper ball is crumbled. And I, or your friend, would be another. Your friends and neighbors are just other examples of the infinite possible ways this singular piece of paper could be wrinkled up into a ball. I imagine that even blades of grass or microorganisms are examples of a more simple wrinkles of the very same paper. So what I was going to do was just say, originally this is us, and I was going to crumple up the piece of paper to show, that how what we are is those infinite variations of wrinkles in there, in the paper. But then I wanted to make a further point that each of us are an individual wrinkle of a different piece of paper. So I didn't want to wrinkle a whole bunch of different pieces of papers and balls of paper and say, here's me, here's you, here's your neighbor, because all those pieces of papers are separate. So it's not consistent with the analogy. To be consistent with the analogy, the way I think the one manifests as many is that this indentation process, this invagination process, happens infinitely. So if this is reality, and it creases on itself, that would just be one indentation. So that little fold, that little contraction would just be one example of a particular wrinkle, a particular vortex, if you see what I mean, under there. And then space, or the one, would be filled with infinite of these indentations. So over here you'd have another one, another infinite indentation. Another indentation, another contraction, all infinite contractions of the same one. So basically the same one, imagine this piece of paper being infinite, and it has infinite contractions, or infinite little black holes. That's really what these are looking like. Each little wrinkle is a black hole. So basically what reality would just be one whole, but with infinite of these contractions. And oddly enough, or not oddly enough, but fittingly enough, that's exactly what the physical universe looks like, which is an infinite space with infinite black holes contracting within themselves. All right, so that is the end of the chapter, but I want to end as I want to end with all chapters by giving you the base, path, and fruit of all of the examples that I listed in this chapter. So in this chapter, I listed these examples of a triune. The base, path, and fruit of 1 divided by itself equaling 3. which is basically mother and father manifesting a kid. The stick rubbing itself to manifest as fire. The Father and Son manifesting as the Holy Ghost. The unmanifest contracting to create the manifest, to transform the unmanifest into the manifest. The source, the movement of source, manifesting as the sense of duality. And the paper being increased, manifesting as the appearance of two. All of these are examples of the triune listed in chapter 1, titled Is. So thank you very much. That wraps up chapter 1, titled Is. And I got to say, that's the most boring chapter. You just got through that. The rest of the book gets really good from here on out. I just had to lay the groundwork with what it is. And in the next chapter, which I'm already done, I'll put up next week, is called Do. And that's when things start to get really fun. That's when we start to talk about what the is actually does. So again, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.